Good morning, and welcome to Civic Lab TO's Common Curriculum. Today's session will focus on climate change and green recovery. My name is Gus Lynn Peluso, and I'm a professor at Seneca College, and I'm here today with Erica Weiss and Chantel Chung, who are both students at the college. The three of us will be acting as your moderators for today's session. Erica.
Thank you, Gus. As this class is virtual and we are not all gathered in the same space, I recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you're currently on. We ask that if, in this case, you acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. For those of us in Toronto, I'd like to acknowledge that the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. I will now ask Chantel to introduce the course and class.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today for our final City Hall session. The Civic Lab TO Common Curriculum is presented by Strategic Partnerships and the City Manager's Office within the City of Toronto, in collaboration with the 8 higher education institutions represented here today. Keeping items. Today's session is being recorded and participants are asked not to share any personal information within the meeting. The session will be available on toronto.ca/civiclabto and made available to your instructor in the near future. There will be time for Q&As at the end of today's event, but if you'd like to submit a question during the session, please enter it into the chat or QA feature at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. For those connected to WebEx through smartphones, if you are in an area with poor cell service and relying solely on data, you may experience intermittent buffering and may want to call into the meeting instead. Lastly, everyone will be manually muted during today's event, so please address any concerns and questions within the chat box. Moving on to today's exciting events, we will be hearing from 4 speakers from the City of Toronto regarding climate change and green recovery. Nancy Rusika speaking about Climate Change Action Plan, Jane Welch, Project Manager of Environmental Planning and City Planning, Rob McMonigal, Senior Advisor with the Green Sector, Economic Development and Culture Division, and finally, Michael Skaljan, Manager of Policy and Planning with the Solid Waste Management Division. I'll now pass it back to Erica.
Thank you for the brief introduction, Chantel. Before we hear from our first speaker, please join me in welcoming Jennifer McKelvey, City Councillor for Scarborough Rouge Park, for some opening remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Erica, and likewise thank you, Gus, Chantel, for the invitation to be in this session, and Manjeet, Jeff, and Rihanna for all the great work you're doing on the Civic Lab Summit. Welcome everybody to today's Civic Lab TO session on climate change and green recovery. This is a particularly important time to be discussing climate change in the City of Toronto. Not only has the International Summit on COP26 recently wrapped up, but we are preparing to release our net zero strategy within the next few weeks. The city staff who are here to talk to you today, along with their colleagues, have all been working extremely hard to ensure that the city is taking necessary action to reach our ambitious climate goals. And our goals are indeed ambitious. On October 2nd, 2019, Toronto City Council voted unanimously to declare a climate emergency and accelerate efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change, adopting a stronger emissions reduction target than they've ever had before, and a commitment to reach net zero by 2050 or sooner. Then, 5 months later, on March 17th, 2020, the government in Ontario declared a state of emergency in response to COVID-19. In a sense, it seems like everything stopped. Scientists were reporting that our air quality was suddenly better because there were fewer cars on the road as people worked remotely. We also made fewer trips to the grocery store. We were more thoughtful in our purchases. We had less food waste, and we certainly, I know in my house, made better use of leftovers than we ever had. While these changes have appeared to be happy accidents at first, we soon learned that, like climate change, the pandemic disproportionately impacts Black, Indigenous, and people of color throughout our city. Green recovery is a fair and just recovery that also supports the city's action on climate change and makes us collectively more resilient to potential future pandemics or weather events. Like a green recovery, our city's response to climate change requires the support and the leadership of the provincial and the federal governments. In order to act urgently, to act boldly, all three levels of government need to work together towards this common goal. The urgency to act on climate change was a large part of why I transitioned from a career as an environmental geoscientist to a politician. As a summer co-op student more than 20 years ago in Yellowknife, I helped to collect samples and data from several hydrometric stations. I was really happy to be collecting baseline data for a long-term study investigating climate change in Canada's subarctic. At the time, scientists were predicting that the Arctic and subarctic would warm faster than the rest of the world. And indeed, what they found was true. Climate scientists were later finding, a decade later, as I was in Greenland conducting field work, that the glaciers were melting at an unprecedented rate. And the scientists in the field and the residents spoke about the changes that they were able to see. But then, here in Scarborough Rouge Park in 2017, we saw very vividly the impacts of climate change as we saw record lake levels of Lake Ontario, and we had flooding of our parking lots and other areas across the city. It was clear by then that the impacts of climate change are being felt right here, right now, and we need to act. After my election in 2018, I was very fortunate to be designated as Mayor Tory's Resilience and Environment Champion. And in that capacity, I was able to have an active role in the climate change, resilience, and ravine strategies. I'm just so pleased to see as a city that we are looking across the organization, across all divisions, to use a climate lens to make our decisions. By ensuring that all city divisions are engaged in discussions about climate change, and climate action will remain a priority in everything we do as a city, ensuring a more sustainable future for all. I'm super inspired by all of you here today, and it's events and conversations like this that will really continue to generate change. I do want to make a shout out to a program at the city called Women for Climate. For all the women that are listening today, please do look at it at livegreentoronto.ca. We are trying to encourage the next generation of leaders. We need all voices at the table, and that includes women. Today's session is the last Common Curriculum session, but the good news is that you have the Civic Lab TO Academic Summit next week. I hope you'll all join us there to continue this important conversation. I unfortunately need to leave to go to Budget Committee. I'll make sure to ask some climate questions for all of you. But the good news is that you're in very capable hands today with Nancy, Jane, Rob, and Michael. Thank you so much for the opportunity to give you some remarks today. I hope I'll see you all here next week to continue this conversation as well.
Thank you so much, Councillor McKelvey. That was amazing. And now to kick off our discussion and provide some background on Civic Lab TO and the importance of collaborations like this one, I'm happy to welcome Manjeet Jita, Director of Strategic Partnerships.
Thank you, Gus, Erica, and Chantel. And many thanks to Councillor McKelvey. As we've said before in our previous sessions, the work of the city is done through the leadership of elected officials and staff working together to advance city priorities. This also includes other orders of governance, as the councillor mentioned. Councillor McKelvey is not only leading the climate change file, but is also our academic partnership work lead as well through the Civic Lab TO program. She'll be speaking at the Civic Lab TO Summit next week, so don't miss her. I hope you've all registered, and remember, you don't have to join for the full 2 days. You can join as many sessions you are able to or want to. You should also tune into Council, where you can look up for Councillor McKelvey as she debates and advances these and other important city strategies and issues. So good morning, students, professors, and staff, and welcome to our last session of this series. But before I go any further, I just want to add my thanks to all of you, the students, for your interest, engagement, and your challenging questions, the professors who are creating the link between academic learning and its application to city challenges and opportunities, and to the city team of more than 30 presenters over the last 6 sessions who really supported this work, everyone in front of the camera and behind the camera, making things happen. And on that note, I have to thank two members of my team at this time, Rihanna Lai and Jeff Moore. Jeff has led the organizing of these city sessions together with Rihanna, who's managed the technical production. Together, they are the ones who make sure things happen seamlessly and that everyone has what they need, making sure that your questions are sent to the moderators, following up after the sessions to get so that you get the presentation materials, managing the captioning of the videos and the recordings, and providing you with all those great reference materials and links. I'm very fortunate to work with both of them. Jeff, can I convince you to turn on your camera and say a few things?
Sure, twist my arm. Thanks, Manjeet. And thank you to all of you for joining us, for being so engaged. And thank you to all of our speakers and moderators for being so engaging. I know I, for one, have learned a lot during these sessions about the opportunities before us, the interesting people here at the city, and their important work. And I trust you have too. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Rihanna, a few words from you. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, I mean, this has been such a great experience to be in this space with all these universities and all the students and all the engagement that's been happening in the chat. You know, I hope we can continue this course curriculum for future years and future students as, you know, this connection with government and just understanding how things work has been, you know, a really good experience for everybody. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you, Rihanna. So for everyone joining today's session, I hope you found these sessions informative and interesting, and I hope that we have inspired you to think about municipal government as a place that you might want to work. Today's session is all about climate change and green recovery. Our speakers will address city strategies and policies and how we're advancing this work as we look at how this issue disproportionately impacts marginalized communities, how the economy is impacted and is adapting with new innovations and technologies, and how we are planning the spaces and the buildings in our city in response to the climate change and green recovery agenda. Chris Murray, our city manager, would say that climate change and green recovery is one of the most important challenges we must take action on, whatever program, whatever discipline you're studying, or whatever area of work you're involved in. It demands that all of us work on this issue. I know that you know this, and I know that this topic is important to you and your future. What I can say is that your insights, analysis, and actions will have the power to shape what happens. With this, I'm actually going to pass it back to Gus to introduce my wonderful colleagues presenting today. Enjoy the session.
Thank you, Manjeet, Jeff, and Rihanna for all those kind words. Our first presenter for today, we have Nancy Rusika.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's great to be here. Can you hear me okay? Great. So if we can pull up the first slide, the title slide, that would be great. Thank you. So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, my career path has not exactly been a linear journey. I think that holds true for a lot of other people. I have a BA in social development from the University of Waterloo, and my plan was to go into social work. That didn't happen. I bounced around from a bunch of different careers. You know, I did a lot of administrative work in offices. I was a registered insurance broker at one point. And then I landed a role in direct response television fundraising in the private sector. And this was a really exciting career for me. My job was production manager, and we produced fundraising infomercials for a wide variety of clients, like World Wildlife Fund, Amnesty International, Toronto Humane Society, and Greenpeace. I was with that role for many years, and eventually I was looking for a change. And I came across an opportunity at the City of Toronto in the Environment Office. And I don't have an environmental background, so this was a bit of a stretch for me. But what they were looking for was someone to develop a Green Awards program and do event coordination. I thought, you know what, yeah, I can do that. My skills are transferable. I'd never thought about a career in public service. I'd never even been to City Hall. My first day was like, wow, look at this building. It's amazing. I started in 2002, and the rest is history. My heart lit up when I walked into City Hall, and I thought, yeah, this is the place for me. So I managed to transition that temporary role into a full-time gig, and in 2008, I became the manager of outreach and engagement, and it's a job that I absolutely adore. I have the best team in the world. And recently, I stepped into the role as interim director for the division for environment and energy. And that's been a really exciting challenge for me. I am looking forward to going back to my role and being back with my team again and doing the work that we are so good at. So again, starting out, I never imagined a career at the city, but it has been a tremendously rewarding experience for me, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. So next slide, please. So a little bit about the Environment and Energy Division. The City of Toronto's EED is accountable for providing cross-corporate leadership and coordination on environment and energy sustainability outcomes. The division provides research and policy expertise, develops policies and programs relating to environment and energy, establishes partnerships with internal and external stakeholders, promotes environmental sustainability, energy efficiency, and conservation within the city's operations, and supports residents and businesses in adopting sustainable lifestyles and business practices. Most of our policy work from EED is presented to the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, and we saw Councillor McKelvey here today, and she is the chair of that committee, and she's great at it. Next slide, please. What we see here is a projection of Toronto's future weather for the period of 2040 to 2050. It is predicted that Toronto will be experiencing more hot days where the temperature is higher than we currently experience, extended heat waves, and much higher levels of daily rainfall. We may be getting less overall rainfall on an annual basis in Toronto, but the amount of rain falling in single events will be much higher. And as we all know, we've already begun to experience all of these weather changes in Toronto. Next slide, please. We conducted a citywide survey in 2018 that found that 78% of people are concerned about climate change in Toronto, with 92% of residents agreeing that climate change threatens personal health and well-being. 82% believe there's a link between climate change and extreme weather events, and 91% agree that everyone needs to reduce their emissions. These are some great results. But the big problem is that 48% of residents didn't know what they could do to address climate change. Further, nearly a quarter of people expressed a feeling of helplessness in that they believe there's nothing a resident can do that will make a difference in addressing climate change in Toronto. We've recently conducted a new survey, and we'll have results available in December. So it'll be interesting to see if these perceptions and attitudes have changed at all. And next slide, please. So in 2017, Transform TO, Toronto's climate action strategy, was unanimously approved by City Council, demonstrating Toronto's commitment to a global call for action to limit global temperature rise in line with international goals. Transform TO lays out the actions necessary to reach our targets and limit temperature increases. And next slide. Transform TO is guided by a set of principles. It aims to create benefits for the community by designing and implementing climate actions. And as you can see here, the various guiding principles, let me just open my screen. Those are to advance social equity, protect low-income residents, improve affordability, particularly for vulnerable populations, enhance and strengthen the local economy, maintain and create good quality local jobs, improve public health, contribute to poverty reduction, and create resilient communities and infrastructure. And next slide, please. So in 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency, which Councillor McKelvey was chatting about earlier. that committed Toronto to be net zero by 2050 or sooner. The city has developed, through the EED, our office, a draft net zero strategy that will outline a pathway to achieve net zero emissions in Toronto, and that will be considered by the city's Infrastructure and Environment Committee on December 2nd. And next slide, please. So where do the emissions in Toronto come from? As we can see here from the 2018 GHG inventory, the largest sources of emissions are from buildings at 55%, transportation at 36%, followed by waste at 9%. And we will shortly be releasing a new 2019 GHG inventory, so it'll be interesting to see how those numbers have changed, if at all. And next slide, please. And here we see a breakdown of emissions by the buildings, transportation, and waste sectors. For buildings, 55% of the emissions are residential, with 73% of passenger vehicles making up the bulk of emissions for transportation, and 98% of waste emissions are from landfill. And next slide, please. In 2018, Toronto's community-wide GHG emissions were 16.2 megatons, which is 37% lower than in 1990. Toronto is on track to achieve its target of a 30% reduction by 2020. However, community-wide emissions increased 7% over 2017 when Toronto emitted 15.1 megatons, as you can see here in the graph. The 7% increase in GHG emissions between 2017 and 2018 occurred mainly in the building sector and can be explained by a cooler winter season, which drove up natural gas usage by about 10% in 2018. A sharp increase in the emissions factor for electricity also contributed to the increase in emissions from buildings. And next slide, please. So here we have a progress to our targets, and you see there circled the very critical target that I'm going to speak about in a bit. But the council-approved emissions reduction target of 65% by 2030 is a key milestone in the emissions reduction pathway. And next slide, please. So Toronto's GHG emissions reductions have happened in the context of both population and economic growth. Generally, over time, community-wide emissions are decreasing, even as population and GDP rise, which indicates Toronto is on the path to a low-carbon future. And next slide, please. And here you can see, there we are, the pathway to net zero. What you also see here is the 2030 council-adopted target of reaching a 65% reduction in emissions from 1990 levels by 2030. What this means is that we have to cut our current emissions in half in the next 8 years. It's a big goal. It's imperative to reach the near-term 2030 goal in order to achieve net zero by 2050 or sooner. And next slide, please. So what we've learned is the actions that were adopted previously by Council as part of Transform TO, and you can see these actions here. They're the right actions. We don't need to do anything differently per se, but to achieve net zero by 2050 or sooner, we need to do things faster. And next slide, please. So I'd like to highlight some of the key challenges, and you can see the bullet points here. Limited time. So bold action is required now. Achieving our 2030 targets requires for all current climate actions to continue, and new and accelerated action to start right now. Jurisdiction and interdependencies. The City of Toronto cannot achieve net zero alone. In fact, with current authorities and systems in place, the city only directly controls a small portion of our community-wide emissions. Decarbonizing Toronto will require leadership from all levels of government and the private sector, as well as active participation from the community. It will require rapidly scaling up many programs and policies that the city and other governments already have underway, as well as new action by all parties. Inequity, and I believe Councillor McKelvey touched on this as well, and this is very important. Toronto's equity-deserving residents are affected more than others by climate change, while also contributing less in terms of emissions. There are many systemic equity issues that need to be addressed in climate action. The city is committed to designing climate actions to maximize their benefit to equity-deserving and vulnerable groups by applying an equity lens to program design. And the adoption of behavior change. Many actions require transformational changes from individuals and business, some of which may be difficult or currently inaccessible. We also know 48% of Torontonians report they don't know what they can do to address climate change. And last but not least, financial investment. Some actions will be at a cost to both the city and to individual residents. While there's likely to be a net savings in the future, there is an upfront cost to many actions, in some cases quite significant. And next slide, please. So just to look at the opportunities that are ahead for us. So the co-benefits of climate action. Overall, decarbonizing the city will require new investments that provide multiple benefits, such as improved well-being and quality of life, and new business and job opportunities. Many of the proposed actions not only achieve GHG emissions reductions, they also support other city objectives, such as improved economic development, health and equity outcomes, and climate resilience. Existing technologies. All of the climate actions are technologically feasible, meaning they use existing technology. There is no need to wait for new technology, so all actions can happen and be scaled up right now. The labor market. Existing climate action has already strengthened Toronto's economy. Toronto's green industries are one of the fastest growing sectors of Toronto's economy, and I'm sure my friend Rob McMonagle will be chatting about that later. Aggressive climate action adds millions of person-years of employment, tens of thousands of jobs per year. Financial savings. Swift action is likely to result in overall savings to the City of Toronto, as well as individuals and businesses will see reduced costs for energy and transportation. Civic engagement, which is near and dear to my heart. Climate action provides many opportunities for individuals and businesses in Toronto to be involved in the municipality, whether through local climate projects, engagement in policy design and implementation, involvement with City Council and committees. Currently, thousands of Torontonians are engaging in climate action in partnership with the city. And next slide, please. So as was mentioned, the net zero strategy is going to be considered by the IEC, the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, on December 2nd. One moment. So the agenda will be posted on November 25th, and you can register to depute if you are interested in doing so. Other ways to get involved, we have our Live Green Toronto Volunteers Program and our Neighborhood Climate Action Champions Program. You can check out livegreentoronto.ca for more information. Also at livegreentoronto.ca is Let's Transform TO Together, where you can learn about climate action stakeholder network, climate action grants, and much more. So many ways to get involved. And next slide. And just to leave you all with some positivity and hope, here's just a few examples and pictures of how the community continued to participate in many local level climate action projects in 2020 to 2021 throughout the pandemic. So climate continues to be at the forefront of concern and action for many of Toronto's neighborhoods. And last slide. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nancy, on speaking with us about the importance of addressing this climate emergency. Next up, we have Jane Welsh.
Jane, you're muted.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me now? Can you see my screen, by the way?
Yes, can see the screen and can hear you now.
Okay. Excellent, sorry about that. Okay, so my name is Jane Welsh and I'm the Acting Manager for the Policy Unit in City Planning, which includes developing and implementing policies for the environment as it applies to land use planning. The work is about understanding the city's sustainability objectives, as Nancy spoke to, for climate action and resilience, and understanding our legal authority and how we can push the envelope. Sorry, Jeff, did you? Okay. So you can see my notes, so I need to shift screens. Is that better?
That works well.
Perfect. Okay, keep going. So it's about understanding what our legal authority is and how we can push the envelope. It's also about creating awareness of environmental issues, encouraging voluntary change through changing expectations of our developers, and writing the rules for new development. And this requires doing our research, our homework, our analysis, and also good report writing. As city staff, we provide advice, but our reports have to be clear so that the public and council who make the decisions understand what we intend. In terms of my background, I have an undergraduate degree in landscape architecture and a master's in planning. I'm quite passionate about making a difference and changing the way we build our city, and our team has been successful in creating and implementing innovative policy solutions to advance more sustainable city building. In addition to my role in leading the environment team, I also volunteer with the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects as the chair of the Committee on Climate Adaptation. So basically, this slide shows you what we're up against, or what we deal with every day. It's about it shows the estimated future population of all the applications currently either in the pipeline, either approved or still under review or completed. This would effectively add another 400,000 people to the city's population, bringing us to 3.3 million. This means we're on track to meet the provincial growth plan projection of 3.4 million residents by 2041. It also means that we have lots of opportunities to make new growth sustainable. By way of example, over the past 10 years, city planning has approved an average of 22,000 units per year. We also play an active role in both through development and implementation of policy and review of new development, and we're positioned to contribute to Toronto's recovery story, working with other divisions and residents to build back better with a greater focus on resilient and equitable and complete communities. So today I'm just going to talk to you about some of the innovative tools that we work with, including the official plan, our strategies, bylaws, and about communication. Our foundation is really the official plan that guides, it's a regulatory document, it guides city building activities. And building a successful Toronto really means that we have to make sustainable choices about how we grow. We have to see the connections and understand the consequences of our choices. We have to integrate environmental, social, and economic perspectives in our decision making. We also have to meet the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. The official plan envisions Toronto as a city with a healthy natural environment, including clean air, soil, energy, and water, infrastructure and socio-economic systems that are resilient to disruption and climate change, and a connected system of natural features and ecological functions. So most of the policies about environment and climate change can be found in section 3.4 of the official plan, and they state essentially that city building will be environmentally friendly based on minimizing pollution, protecting and restoring the natural ecosystem, protecting and enhancing urban forests, reducing solid waste, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the reliance on fossil fuels, and also reducing the risk associated with hazard. The policies also encourage sustainable design and construction of green roofs and stormwater management, and also the policies in Section 5 enable securing of sustainable design features through the Toronto Green Standard. And in Schedule 3, allows us to require an energy strategy to identify opportunities for energy conservation and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions for all large sites as part of a complete application. So fundamental to resilience in city is the protection of our natural heritage, and this map illustrates our natural system. The natural features and functions such as the valleys and ravines and the shoreline. The orange overlay indicates the environmentally significant areas. Development in the natural heritage system is generally prohibited in the official plan. We're currently undertaking a review of our official plan to be in conformity with the provincial growth plan. And the environment and climate change is one of the 4 specific focus areas. We have already undertaken stakeholder and public consultation and will be developing draft policies proposals which will go out with to consult more with the public on early next year. And to be in conformity with the growth plan, we need to review our policies on climate change, energy, solid waste, and identify key hydrologic features and functions. Part of what we do is we have much more detail in our secondary plan areas, and it gives us an opportunity to further address climate action in our policies. We have many underway or recently complete in different parts of the city, such as the Christie site in Etobicoke, Golden Mile in Scarborough, and the Downsview site in North York. By way of example, the plan for the downtown included policies requiring streetscape to integrate stormwater capture and trees, and also we encouraged development to provide backup power to encourage resilience, and we also encourage biodiversity through requirements for creating habitat and planting varieties of species. Another opportunity we have is large sites. So if you look at a large, and it really gives us a chance to think about what the city could look like, because there's a lot happening there. We can look at how the buildings are organized, their location, their massing, and their orientation to maximize passive solar power, and also to consider district energy systems, securing stormwater retention, providing enough soil for tree canopy, and reducing, treating the pavement to reduce the urban heat island effect. So our most important tool is really the Toronto Green Standard, and we were the first city in Canada to advocate for and develop and implement a standard. It came into effect in 2010, and since then over 2,100 applications have been required to meet a higher level of performance. Submission of the TGS, or the Toronto Green Standard checklist, is part of a complete application. There are 63 required performance measures, and they're organized under 5 priority areas: air quality, energy and resilience, water quality and quantity, ecology and solid waste. And there are 3 standards, one for low-rise residential, one for our own city buildings because we need to lead, and one for everything else. We also, for leaders in the field, we provide a refund on our development charges. This has to be third-party certified that they have met these higher performance requirements, and then they are eligible to receive a refund. And since 2010, 60 projects have been certified to Tier 2, and there's 150 more that are currently targeting Tier 2. So every 4 years, we update the Toronto Green Standard, and that gives us a chance to see how things are going, where we want to push the envelope a bit more. So we recently did that. It was approved by Council last July, and it will come into effect next May. So there's a few new things that happened when we increased the requirements for electric vehicle parking, and we increased it to 25%. However, we have a new report that came out tomorrow and will be before Planning and Housing Committee next week, to increase that to 100%. So all the parking spaces in new development will have to be electric vehicle ready. And that was really the result of a study that was done over the summer by the Clean Air Partnership. We're also advancing the greenhouse gas reduction targets. We've also included a new requirement for embodied emissions tracking. We've enhanced targets around solid waste and stormwater retention, and we include a requirement for new green streets. So I want to show you this chart because in 2017, we worked very closely with Transform TO the Transform TO team to figure out how we were going to get new development to reach the targets we needed to by 2050. So what we laid out, and this provides a lot of transparency for developers as well. So we plan to every 4 years up it so that the tiers increase and in a predictable way. So right now we have approved version 4, which basically the current tier 2 energy requirements will become the new required or mandatory requirements until we get to 2030, and basically all new development will be required to meet net zero. And as I mentioned, we're working on embodied carbon because that is the hidden aspect where you have embodied carbon in building materials. So looking to track that through a study that's currently underway, and we'll report back to Council in 2023 on updates to that. We've also included a new one to look at the landscape and think about both the materials and then the vegetation and how adjusting those can actually contribute to reducing our carbon footprint and our greenhouse gas emissions. We've also looked at requiring now that any new street in a new development be a green street with criteria established around that. And then we're looking to, again, treat more of our hardscape in order to reduce the urban heat island impact. And we do things like we've added things like ensuring that when you're planting adjacent to a ravine, that we already say it should be native, but the additional requirement that it should be regionally sourced seeds. Another very important piece that we developed that was new, we're the first city in North America to actually do this, is introduce a bylaw requiring green roofs for large new development. And that's been successful, resulting in 915 new green roofs, which have a positive impact on the environment. And it's quite exciting when you go up in a higher building and you look down and you see the roofscape in Toronto has changed. It's becoming green. So it's a great message out there. And we do this in collaboration actually as well with our partners in Toronto Building and also Environment and Energy. Nancy's team, we have a cash in lieu requirement, and that cash in lieu goes to provide new green roofs for existing buildings. We also have a few hidden things, like the zoning bylaw, for example, requires that 75% of landscaping be soft landscaping, and that does not mean artificial turf. So it's all working together to make the city more resilient. And we work with our colleagues in Parks, Forestry, and Recreation to develop the new ravine bylaw. And natural features, which means you can't cut down a tree or dump fill in these protected areas. And we also work closely with Parks, Forestry, and Recreation to create the ravine strategy and the biodiversity strategy. These protect the long-term management and investment of the ravines. They improve the quality and quantity of biodiversity, and they also importantly raise awareness and connection to nature. And speaking about creating awareness, we have a whole series, and I've got the link at the end of this to biodiversity booklets. There's 9 of them, and they were done with volunteer citizen scientists who contributed, and we coordinated it. And they're on birds, bees, butterflies, mammals, a whole lot of unexpected things you don't think of when you think of a city, a very urban city like Toronto. We also created a book called An Enduring Wilderness, which again photographs all the wonderful natural areas within the city of Toronto. Well, that concludes my presentation. I just wanted to remind us all that, you know, as we go forward, city building is very important and growing in a sustainable way, but it also means that we really need to remember to protect what we already have that is valuable, and that's our incredible ravine system. And that's my contact and some links for you for areas that you may find of interest. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jane, for showing how the city can combine environmental and city planning in a sustainable way. Just a friendly reminder that if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them as soon as possible. Next up for our speaker, we have Rob McMonagle.
Thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to be here this morning. And let me just get my slides up. Can people see those? Okay, so I'm going to talk today really about local economic development and really the value of that in our fight with climate change. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do with economic development. And we are a relatively unique organization inside governments, and this is often the case both provincially and federally as well. The primary reason for that is in most cases, governments operate kind of with a wall against the stakeholders. Okay, we develop the policies and consultations with stakeholders, but we want to make certain that we are separate from them so that we're not influenced by what's often referred to as lobbying and what have you. Whereas with economic development, okay, we're embedded with the industry. Okay, our role is actually to help the industry grow and be successful. So we're much more involved with the private sector than in most cases with other levels of government. And just like most divisions in governments, okay, there's multiple sections and multiple offices. So where I sit is in sector development at economic development, and that's part of a unit that has 4 different offices. Business retention works with businesses across the city geographically. The business improvement areas are the small business, the main streets. Small businesses are the incubators and the startup companies. With sector development, we actually focus on 8 sectors. And one of the things that's unique about Toronto is we're only actually one of 3 government offices in Canada at a municipal level that focus on growth of specific sectors or clusters. And I'm the lead in supporting the green sectors. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but the green sectors are multiple sectors which are very distinct and face their own separate challenges. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because this is kind of the background of what we do. There are generally 6 drivers to economic growth when you look at it from a cluster or a sector type of level. 4 of those are pretty standard. There's the marketing and the promotion, there's policy and regulations, market development, and workforce development. The 2 that often don't get acknowledged or as to the high level of value is one is the advocacy, the need for stakeholders to work together to implement needed changes to increase the growth of their sector. And the city actually, at economic development, we actually play a critical role in that, both in helping stakeholders advocate, but also advocating on behalf of our stakeholders to other levels of government and also even internally. The last thing is collaboration building, and none of this is possible, okay, without actually building consensus with the stakeholders and coming up with strategies of how do we do it, marketing. What are the policies and the regulations that are needed? This has to be done as a team, okay, rather than working individually. Otherwise, you'll have, in effect, complete chaos. So I'm going to drill down a little bit about how we understand the growth of the industries and also how, what we're doing, in Toronto to understand the size of the green sector. So for economic development, there are what are called industry classification codes. And each company or each type of company has a specific number. So for example, we're looking here at the codes that are in the food manufacturing sectors. And you can see that bakeries and tortilla manufacturers, they have a code of 3118. And you can break that down even further, okay, so that we know, for example, 31183 is tortilla manufacturing, and Stats Canada collects data for all types of companies. So we know that in Toronto, there are actually 3 tortilla manufacturers and that they employ 20 people, at least in 2018. The challenge is when you're dealing with new technologies is the codes take multiple years to develop. So while we know how many tortilla manufacturers there are in Toronto, we don't know how many solar manufacturers there are using statistics. Now, the city has actually come up with a number of methodologies to identify the size of the industry. So we know, for example, that or we know in Toronto, okay, that there are actually 3 solar manufacturers, but they employ over 120 people. So more than 4 times the size of the tortilla manufacturing. But officially, those numbers don't exist. Okay, so it makes it very hard for regulators to identify the opportunities in economic development. The other way of looking at industries, okay, is rather than doing sectors, looking at the supply chains. When you're talking about sectors, you're talking about companies that are effectively competitors. The difference when we start looking at supply chains, so these are companies that are working together, from the manufacturers, the raw materials, the manufacturers through the retailers, and even the consumers are part of that supply chain. So this supply chain, in effect, is creating a cluster of companies that are working together. And it's important to understand the difference in that sectors, okay, tend to be competitors. It's company one versus company two trying to sell products to their customers. Whereas with a cluster approach, we're looking at the collaboration. Yes, company one and company two may be competitors in their sales, but they often will have the same suppliers. They're selling to the same retailer. They're dealing with the same bank. They have the training requirements. So in cluster theory, what we do is we try to identify where these companies are collaborating, what their issues are together, and work with them to develop solutions. An example of a bike cluster is Toronto's bike cluster. It's composed of manufacturers, wholesalers, and government, okay, and industry associations. And government is actually an important element when we talk about clusters. And this is the difference between a sector, okay, which is often in confrontation with governments, okay, focusing on advocacy to get things changed so that they're more successful, and a cluster which actually brings in governments, okay, into the fold and works with them closely to overcome the challenges. So back to kind of the higher level again, when we look at the green sector, we break it down into 5 very different sectors. There's the bioeconomy, there's the clean energy sector, the green building sector, resource management, which is in effect multiple sectors in itself, and sustainable transportation. And using some statistics, okay, that we are able to develop independently of Stats Canada, we estimate that there's about 61,000 people working in the green sectors in Toronto. And in fact, we're growing quite rapidly. If you look at the growth of employment in Toronto, okay, over the last 5 years, ending in 2019, it grew at on average about 2% per year. Whereas the green industries, okay, grew at about 4%, so double. In fact, some sectors are growing even faster, such as the sustainable transportation sector, which is growing about 5% a year. So we work at 2 levels. One is working with individual companies. The other one is working on a cluster approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit of one program that has been quite successful in Toronto, and this is the Green Market Acceleration Program. One of the challenges that startups and small companies have is they face what's often referred to as the valley of death. Okay. Very little costs are required to invent a product, to develop it, okay, but to actually get it into the marketplace takes a lot of money, okay, and that's before the sales are being generated. So there's a real stress for startup companies to get that first customer, to get that demonstration, which will attract new customers. And this is a role that local governments can play quite an effective role in. And the reason for that is we own a lot of infrastructure. We own buildings, we own parks, we own roads, ideal locations for new companies to demonstrate their technology to the public. And that is what the Green Market Acceleration does. It works with these companies, okay, that are looking at getting their product into a real world situation for testing, for proof of concept, and for piloting. And for GMAP, what we do is we act as an advocate for the projects. And here's again, we're government agency acting as an advocate. We will work with these companies to find them a home for their demonstration. We'll advise and mentor them to improve their pitch, and we'll project manage it, okay, to steer the project through to successful completion. Now, the city isn't buying these projects, okay, but what we're doing is we're acting as an effective first customer so that companies can now go out to the marketplace and say, look, it's been tested by the City of Toronto. Here's the results, it works. And over the years, we've done some really cool projects, okay? And it's actually a real fun initiative because we deal with all sorts of innovation throughout the entire ecosystem. So we've done urban tree sawmilling, okay, with Parks and Forestry. We supported a company, which is now a large international company, okay, to develop underwater energy storage. We work with solid waste on looking at how do you recycle green bins or coffee pods through the green bin process. And we're currently working with transportation services to do a digital map of the City of Toronto. So we do a number of things with small business or with individual companies, but I won't go into that much details on that. So really next is really how do we work with clusters of companies? So as I mentioned, there's a naturally occurring clusters, and that's the supply chain. However, if you start doing some organization with those companies that are in the supply chain, they will grow a lot faster. In fact, international stats indicate that companies that are in an organized cluster, grow about 10% faster than outside. And the challenge is in North America, we don't have a lot of cluster management organizations. An example, in Copenhagen, there's 38 cluster management organizations. In all of the GTA, which is a population about 5 times that of Copenhagen, we have 1. So one of the things we do with the sector development office is that in effect, we act as the cluster manager. We work with companies together to resolve their issues. So an example of that is an initiative we did with the urban wood industry over a 5-year period where our initiative supported the growth of the industry. So it went from under 100 people employed to over 800 at the end. And there are measurable economic and environmental impacts on that. Initiative we're doing on right now, because we see huge opportunities in what's called the micromobility sector, is supporting the growth of the bike cluster. Okay, globally, there's a shortage of bikes. We know that. There are makers of local bikes in Toronto. In fact, there's 20 makers in the Toronto area. And there's a huge demand for used bikes. So we're looking at how we can help them overcome supply chain challenges, okay, and also training challenges. The last one, which I wanted to mention, is the Toronto Clean Energy Partnership. And this is, again, an example where we're working as a cluster manager. In the case of the Toronto Clean Energy Partnership, we've been looking at international trade. And there's huge green infrastructure projects being developed around the world, and you require a consortium of companies to bid on them. And this has been a challenge with Toronto, or we're challenged in Canada because we lack those cluster management organizations. So what we have been doing in Toronto is bringing together a team of companies. We have about 40 companies on our Clean Energy Partnership, and we are now using that to bring our expertise internationally. So currently we're working with 4 cities, Warsaw, Kiev, Prague, and Riga in Latvia. And we're coming up with solutions for these cities using Canadian technologies with hopefully the intent of bidding on projects, okay, based on our design in the coming years. So just some closing thoughts. There's been and there continues to be this discussion about the environment versus the economy. If we do something, it's going to create challenges, and companies are going to fail, or there's going to be lack of employment, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's based on a very false premise. Okay, and it's not really an environment versus an economy. It's really about an innovation. Okay, we're trying to protect old business models. Okay, which have been becoming outdated. Okay, because of innovation. Because what we hear about now about the economy and the environment, it's the same argument that was used in the 1890s against cars. Okay, and that was led by the horse and buggy industry. So the countries that have always been successful, okay, are those that can take advantage of innovation. Whether it was the Romans, okay, who built roads, okay, for the first time, or it was Britain, okay, who had their great shipping vessels around the world. It's all focuses on innovation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob, for discussing with us how the environment and economy can work together innovatively. I also really loved how you had those little images. They were great. Finally, we have Michael Scalgin as our last speaker for today, but definitely not the least.
Everyone see the PowerPoint okay? Great. Perfect. Well, thanks for being on having me on the panel today. It's actually a great pleasure because over my 15 years here at the city, I've had a chance to work quite closely with my co-panelists, Nancy, Jane, and Rob, on a number of different portfolios. So it's great to see how our presentations are intersecting even today on a lot of our common work over the years. I started at the city just to inspire anybody interested in coming to the city or any students. I did start on a 6-month contract, similar to Nancy, not much sense of how long I would be working for government 15 years ago. But here I am still today. And I started working at the city on community safety issues based on a lot of my experience before coming to the city, working with correctional facilities and housing support programs, really helping to reintegrate people who found themselves in correctional facilities back into society. And really happy to start the city 15 years ago working on a whole initiative with the Community Safety Secretariat to look at how to reduce and have crisis intervention really for community supports for a number of neighborhoods who are experiencing a lot of critical incidents. From there, I was able to move to the opening of the Tower Renewal Office in 2009. And this was a great initiative that really started to open my eyes to a lot of the work at the city around climate change, where, as Nancy mentioned in her presentation for Transform TO, buildings surprisingly give off a large amount of greenhouse gas emissions. And I was a part of a whole team that was looking at the energy consumption of over 1,000 affordable housing buildings in the city, including Toronto Community Housing, to see how we can reduce this sort of impact of greenhouse gas emissions. But most importantly as well, looking at the social and economic impacts. And my strength or subject matter expertise was around really the whole aspect of looking at how people live in vertical communities and how do we transform the cultures and look at the assets of those vertical communities to really help and assist with climate change initiatives. And that really started me working a lot with planning and Jane and others around whole zoning bylaw changes and policy changes to open up these multi-residential buildings to become really opportunity for economic development and other technologies for greening those buildings. And then I found myself in solid waste, helping to support community-based hubs that can really help promote a culture of waste reduction, not just in multi-res towers, but across the whole city. And so I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that we have going on within solid waste to help towards climate change and green recovery. So one of the big pieces here, when we're talking about solid waste management services in the city, or looking at waste in general related to climate change, probably one of the biggest challenges here, and Nancy mentioned it in part of the Transform TO, landfills give off quite a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions, and we have other issues related to landfills, but one of the biggest challenges for us right now is that the landfill capacity in the province is shrinking significantly. And so the City of Toronto, we have our own landfill for all the waste that we collect and need to dispose of that goes into a landfill just south of London, Ontario. But the amount of landfill, you can see here, there was a report that just came out this year, and I'll put a link in the chat after my presentation, done by the Ontario Waste Management Association. And this group really keeps the track and the pulse of landfill capacity in the province. And so you can see here that essentially in the next 10 to 15 years, we're looking at a shrinking capacity of really throwing waste in the ground, which has been the practice probably for a couple hundred years now to have landfills. And that's slowly been changing, but now we're at a critical point where us at the city and other municipalities need to really look and think differently about how do we manage our residual waste and how do we reduce that amount of waste going to landfill. So the province has a number of legislations that are in place that really the city has to abide by. And a lot of this goes way back to 1990 with changes to the Environmental Protection Act. That is really where we start to see a significant shift in this whole dialogue about the 3 R's regulations: recycling, reducing, and reusing. And that's where that whole framing came from back in the 90s. And there's 2 particular regulations that came out. One was focusing on municipalities now having an obligation and responsibility to divert waste away from the landfill. This is where we got the Blue Bin program from, to say, let's get all those recyclable materials, put them through other processes so we can keep them out of the landfill. And then also we saw that it wasn't just municipalities, but if you started going to food courts or different commercial buildings, everybody's obligated to make sure they have diversion going on. Fast forward to 2016, diversion is still a big priority, but of course now we've got 2 new acts that came in place by the province. One, the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act. And this is really pushing here to say, you know what, diversion is still a big responsibility here. It's still a big priority, diverting materials away from the landfill, but more of a shift, putting the responsibility of paying for and really managing all of that waste diversion on the producers. The companies that make the recyclable items need to be on the hook to be more responsible and accountable for the end-of-life management of their products and packaging. And then that gave birth as well to the Waste Diversion Transition Act, which is really putting in a whole time period for municipalities and others to transition over to that EPR, as its acronym is, EPR model. And we have a phenomenal unit, sister unit to my policy unit, that specializes in looking at how the city would transition over to under an EPR model in the province. And then last but not least, we've got a food and organic waste management framework. And this is really focusing on reducing the amount of food waste going on in the province. And as was mentioned by Councillor McKelvey, many of us have been much more focused on food waste in our own homes during COVID and being more responsible with some of those practices. The other regulation here quickly that could fall under this as well is the Environmental Assessment Act. And this is a provincial regulation that really governs the whole building of landfills. And that's a part of where we've had some changes recently, some amendments made to that act that really makes it more difficult for municipalities and others to build new landfills. And this is all in the spirit of making sure that the future of waste management in the province is focused more on recovery and waste reduction. So what do we do at the city? Listen, we do a whole bunch of stuff. We collect the waste from people's homes and businesses. We transport it, we process it at our facilities. We do composting, and then of course, as I mentioned, whatever's left over after can't be diverted, we dispose of it in our landfill. And here's just a little bit of a collection of all the wonderful things that we do for our customers. And I have to say that we do set a high benchmark out there where we have, I guess you could say, the platinum version of ensuring that anything that's divertible, we want to make sure that our customers have an ability to do that. And so one really important piece here that I really like to include in presentations is that even though we are solid waste management for the City of Toronto, we do not handle 100% of the waste that's generated in the city. We do have certain customers, and so I want to do a quick snapshot of that. So we do have all the single-family homes in the city are serviced by us. So if you live in a single-family home, curbside collection is referred to as well. That's our main mandate. So we do service all the single-family homes in the city. But we do not handle all the multi-residential buildings. So they're not obligated to get services from the city. And so we have about 400,000 units that are part of our customer accounts. And that's where we deal with hauling waste away from buildings. And now we also have some small-scale commercial customers, churches, schools that we collect from. So in total, we're looking at about 900,000 customers that we have that we haul the waste from and sort and process. Now, the other components that we have on the right side of the screen there is that we do also manage all of the public space bins. So whether they're in parks, we have over 10,000 bins in parks and open spaces, over 10,000 street litter bins, and we support on a regular basis over 1,000 events in the city. And then we have drop-off depots as well, where people can bring items for diversion and disposal. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we have in the waste industry is because we've been talking about diversion. Diversion does not always go so well. And we speak about this as one of the main items for us or challenges is the contamination of the blue bin. This is where people are throwing in non-recyclable items into the blue bin. It could be organics, it could be regular garbage. And this is probably one of the biggest challenges we have because if those recycling bins are contaminated, this works significantly against our diversion goals because the bins are often collected and taken to a transfer station. Solid waste staff do their best to sort through the blue bins to remove contaminants, but sometimes it can be almost impossible, and it can be very easy for sometimes a small amount of contaminant to contaminate the whole batch of blue bin materials, and they have to all go to landfill. So it can be really discouraging for a lot of people. If we got some contaminants in the blue bin, our hard work can go to waste quite literally and have to be thrown in the landfill. So why is it so complicated for the recycling piece? And so I think one of the main things to look at here is we have an ever-changing sort of focus on increasing complexity of packaging. We got a movement, we have trends here in the industry where people are moving from glass bottles to plastic bottles. And that means we're changing from heavier to lighter materials. We also have situations where we have more convenience being developed. For, let's say, coffee pods was brought up by Rob McMonagle. We have it's more of a culture to use coffee pods these days, which for the most part may not be recyclable or compostable. And this is a moving away from more reusable coffee pot sort of options. Also, we find that we have a reduction of newspaper in blue bins, which is significant as people are moving to more online viewing of news. And we have a quick example here of how packaging is changing. You know, baby food is one example that we've noticed where they used to be in glass jars that was more recyclable. And now they're moving to different kind of packaging where you're squeezing out this baby food. But those packages are often not recyclable. So we got very different shifts going on in the manufacturing world that causes us some problems when we look at recyclable materials. Now, the other challenge is that even though something can be labeled as recyclable, it may not be recyclable. And some of the challenges here is that every city has different lists of what is compatible with their recycling blue bin system. And this can often cause a lot of trouble. Even our green bin programs can be quite different across various municipalities. So one example here is you have like coffee pods as well. Some may be labeled as biodegradable, others are not. Some are recyclable, others aren't. And it gets confusing for residents, right? They don't know where to throw it, and they end up assuming, oh, you can throw all of these into the recycling bin or the compost bin. One of the other big challenges that we're working on at the city as well is that items labeled as compostable, again, are not necessarily compatible with the city's green bin program. Manufacturers will often say that items are compostable, and there's been a lot of discussion going on across the province around this, where even for the city, when we have items going into our green bin program, they get sent over to our organic processing facilities, and to make a long story short, these items often take longer to biodegrade and compost than is available in the time frame of our own composting technologies and systems. So what happens is many of these things get scraped out and thrown to landfill anyway. So what are we doing at the city? We've got a lot of campaigns going on, and I have to say we have some of the most significantly resource materials for residents to provide that education and awareness. We want everybody to know what needs to go into which stream and what other services are available to divert household hazardous waste or yard waste and other materials so that everyone is in the know. And if you haven't downloaded the Toronto Waste app, please do so. This is probably one of our best resources to help increase diversion in the city of Toronto. It's an app you can download on your phone. You can ask it any questions in terms of any particular items you don't know where it goes. It'll tell you where to put it, which stream. or even taking items for donation so that you're not throwing them in the garbage. And that was all birthed out of, we have a web-based version as well, which is called the Waste Wizard. And you can also query any items there as well and be able to find out where items need to go. And of course, if all else fails, please call 311 and those operators can direct you to the right staff in my unit or in my division to help you figure out where to put your waste. Now, in 2016, the city came out with our own policy and strategy around long-term waste management. And this is really hand in glove with the new legislation from the province that came out the same year, and really trying to make sure that we're not just looking at recycling and sort of compostable items as the main tactic for dealing with the waste going to landfill. We want to focus on the top of the waste hierarchy, and that's on waste reduction, and secondly, reuse. And this is a really big proponent for us to make sure that we are dealing with all of that divertible waste from the landfill. And then last but not least down there as well, we have recovery, which is also seeing how we can create energy from waste. And this gave birth to a whole bunch of programs, initiatives over the last 5 years that we've been implementing. And the main focus that came out of the long-term waste management strategy was saying, if you want to have a successful environmental program, if you want to have success in reducing waste, you need to make sure you're including social and economic opportunities and partnerships out there. So we're talking about actually engaging people in communities where they live day to day, and how do they transform those neighborhoods and their interactions to be able to promote more of a culture of waste reduction. So one of the things that we have been doing, and this is something that I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have been setting up sharing and reuse and repair hubs in multi-residential buildings across the city. And we have focused on neighborhood improvement areas so that we can make sure that we're helping people who are most in need of these programs, as well as economic and employment opportunities. So one of the great things that we have is we're actually setting up repair workshops that people will have access to tools and experienced fixers who can help them to repair items, stretching their lifespan and avoiding them from going into the landfill. We have an urban harvest program that looks at food waste reduction, where we have teams trained to take cargo bicycles into single-family home neighborhoods with people who have fruit trees and gardens in their backyard. And if they have surplus harvest in their backyard, they can redistribute that surplus harvest to people who need that food. We also have bicycle repair workshops. We have sewing repair workshops and supporting community composting programs. And one of the other big things that we're doing, which is a national campaign with the National Zero Waste Council, is called Love Food, Hate Waste Campaign. And I'll send some more links around in the chat after my presentation. But some phenomenal work to really help promote food waste reduction in the home, making sure people are planning their meals and keeping their food fresh. Now, one of the other big initiatives that we have around on the policy front for the City of Toronto is really looking to see how we can reduce the single-use and takeaway items. And it's a big reduction strategy. We're coming forward to council next year with some mandatory measures. And one of the biggest things here, to summarize this for everybody, this is all the single-use items and takeaway items that we get when we're buying food from various establishments or retail establishments. And we're really zeroing in here on all the plastic cutlery, the straws. We're looking at paper and plastic shopping bags. We're looking at trying to reduce the amount of cups and containers that are being used for takeout, specifically foam and black plastic containers are some of the bigger culprits out there. And this is really a whole team that we have focused on creating new bylaws coming up, as well as putting in support for businesses to transition to a sort of single-use and takeaway item reduction strategy in their own operations, and making sure that they're also accepting reusable items from customers for their food and takeout orders. We also have a whole unit called the Circular Economy and Innovation Unit, and this is looking at the big picture. This is looking at the whole loop when it comes to packaging and waste from packaging, and seeing how do we actually create more of an economy that looks at the whole life cycle for a lot of these items and talks to the manufacturing companies, looks at other innovative technologies, so we can see how we can make more of a circular economy, maximize resources, and reduce waste in the whole life cycle chain of materials. And one of the final thing I wanted to mention a little bit, and there's so much that we're doing in solid waste, I have to say, to reduce waste and to engage people. But one of the other big items as well is that we have a great project going on right now where out of all the, or some of the organic waste that we collect is taken to a facility which is a technology called anaerobic digestion. And what we're able to do is actually siphon off the biogas that comes from the organics and actually create renewable natural gas. Now, this could be thrown back onto the grid, but also that we could sell it back on the grid as a resource, but as a commodity, but also we can use it to fuel our own collection vehicles. So we have a great closed loop here where we're working feverishly on this to get this operational and having our own trucks be fueled by biogas, renewable natural gas created from biogas through organic collection from the green bin. That's my presentation. There's lots to talk about in terms of opportunities and challenges with solid waste, but I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation and that it was a waste of your time.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to all the speakers. A lot for us to think about, and I know particularly this topic is right at the top of the mind of a lot of our students who think daily about this and are interested in doing something about this. Michael, I'm also just want to say that I'm glad to hear you talk about the confusion around the recycling. I'm one of those people that can be found hovering over the blue bin every week trying to figure out where to put something. And I'm wondering, I'm sure I've made mistakes. I'm positive I've made mistakes, but there are no repercussions. I never find out. Do we have any system in place or any thoughts in place for people to get that sort of information so that I know if I'm doing it right or wrong? Similarly, Rob, you mentioned things like the cluster model that you're using or you're trying to implement, and that sounded fantastic to me, but is there any bite to the city's policies? In other words, do you have teeth to it? Is there anything that can be done if people don't follow it or don't engage in it or say they will, but then let it fall apart? Do we have any teeth? Does the city have any power? Either one.
Rob, did you want to go first, or?
Yeah, when we're talking about, cluster management organizations, the city, can't force companies to work together, right? Okay, just like you can't, have two people work together. Okay, you have to show them the value of that. Okay, and that's really what we try to do, is show companies the value of working together in clusters. Okay, and once they get in, they tend to get that. We have been very instrumental in creating cluster management organizations in the past. Okay, we supported, a cluster management organization, for example, for the Toronto financial sector, which is one of the strongest sectors in the world. Globally, okay, cluster management organizations are often funded initially by the municipality. So I showed you Copenhagen. They're one of the top cities in the world to create clusters. Okay, and look at how successful they are economically.
Michael, do you have anything?
Well, I just want to respond. I think, Gus, you were asking if people want to know how bad the contamination is of their blue bin or organics. I can look more into that, but we do have our whole customer accounts team. They have done some triaging of people. They do regular inspections of blue bins, and they'll often, if they come across, they'll go ahead of the collection trucks, and they'll check and make sure sometimes if those bins are heavily contaminated, they push them back. They'll put a little friendly note for the customer to say, listen, your blue bin's a little contaminated. We're not going to pick that up today. Please clean it up. We'll pick it up next time. But we can see if they actually have data for that, say, for your particular residence. The only challenge is it's really only available for single-family homes. Multi-res, it's much harder, of course, to know. But it is important to note, if I didn't say it earlier, that people living in single-family homes pretty much pat yourselves on the back. Strong, high, good outcomes for diversion I think it's in the 70 to 8, between 70 to 80% there, diversion going on. Multi-res buildings, you're looking at about 28% diversion rate, significantly lower. A lot of challenges for those of us living in vertical communities to properly divert our waste. But we have lots of, as I mentioned, programs and services to help people in buildings to improve that number.
Thank you. One of our students asked that, or noticed that the Transform TO and the resiliency strategy have similar approaches and missions, but there is some confusion there. How would you explain away the confusion? In other words, how do we clearly differentiate between the two?
I can take that one, Gus. So Transform TO focuses primarily on mitigation, and resiliency, of course, is about adaptation. Previously, the city had a central chief resilience officer and a centralized resiliency office. We currently don't have that. However, that doesn't mean resiliency isn't happening across the corporation in various divisions. But I am very pleased to announce that resiliency will be part of Environment and Energy's portfolio starting in 2022. So we will be providing that cross corporate coordination for the resiliency file.
Thank you. More and more people, I would imagine, are living in condos these days. And one of our students asked specifically around whose responsibility is it? Is it the condo's responsibility to separate and divide? Is it the cities? And for condos that are not doing that, what can be done? I guess that's for you, Michael.
Sorry, I was trying to work on the chat there. Could you repeat the question, Gus?
Right. So some condos do not separate the different types of waste. Is that strictly an individual condo responsibility? Is that something that the city is looking into, demanding that the condos also separate that? How does that process work? And what can condo residents do?
Great. Yeah. So one of the big pieces here that, in a lot of this relates to garbage chutes. I think there was a question that came up as well. Garbage chutes were built back in, the buildings often were built before a lot of this diversion came in place. New buildings are coming out with this new technology called tri-sorters, where you can press a button and it will it's the same chute, but at the bottom it shifts the machine to go into a blue bin, a green bin, or the waste. That's maybe more for new condos that are being developed. But if you have a building that only has a garbage chute, really what you have there is, even in my building, you'll have somewhere in the building a place for residents to bring down their organics, bring down their recycling. But right now, buildings really should have a place to divert recycling. But organics is something that we have for city building collections, city collections for buildings. But not every building has organics, and that's more of a provincial mandate and being enforced hopefully sooner than later. That all buildings will be really required to have organics collection as well.
Thank you. Well, we have an incredible amount of questions and only a couple of minutes left. So what I want to encourage people to do is continue to send in your questions, and they'll be compiled, and then the people involved here will respond to the questions, and they'll be distributed to your professors. I'd like to ask something specifically that I know a number of my students have expressed. There's frustration because they want to be involved and they want to do something. And you guys have provided lots of interesting opportunities or ideas about how people can become involved. But if you were on the outside looking in, if you weren't at City Hall right now, what would you jump to do? In other words, what would you suggest that our first thing our students should do if they want to be involved, both in the city and particularly around climate change? Jane, I don't know. I'll just start with you.
I can give you one answer. Certainly they should prepare comments on the proposals that will come out early in the new year on official plan, climate change, and environment policies. That would be great and welcomed. And you can find that, I think I gave the link, but it's under OP review.
Okay, and let's make sure that link is also on the in the responses that for our students. Yeah, great, thank you. Nancy?
Yeah, and I mentioned it in my talk, but also we have a very large volunteer program, the Live Green Toronto Volunteer Program, and it's a great way to get involved in being a green ambassador for the city and for climate action, engaging your neighbors and friends and residents in taking climate action. It's a wonderful way to meet people, to learn about city programs. We have training on all city programs, so our volunteers are well versed in all of the great programs the city has to offer. So I would highly encourage anybody who's interested in taking action and getting involved to check out the Live Green Toronto Volunteers Program.
I think we're going to have to end the question and answers there now, and I'll ask Chantel for some closing remarks.
Thank you, everyone, for all your wonderful questions, and we'll be sure to get those out to you. So on behalf of Erica, Gus, and I, and all the other students and professors within the varying institutions that have been part of this class, I'd like to thank the City of Toronto for making this possible. Special thanks to Manjeet Jita, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships within the Civic Lab TO, who has had a major role in creating this common curriculum for all of us students. As well as special thanks to Joe Mihevik, who was the catalyst that got this course going. Special thanks as well to Rihanna Lai and Jeff Moore for their continuous work each week as moderators here on our virtual platform and all the organization they've done to prepare for each session. Thank you to all who were involved, both behind the scenes and those front and center throughout the past couple of weeks. Special thanks to all the speakers and presenters who took time out of their day to come and speak to us about the important work that is being done within the city. I would also like to acknowledge the cross-institution collaboration and each of the institutions participating in this class, including Seneca, Ryerson, Humber, York, George Brown, OCAD, Centennial, and U of T. This is our final Civic Lab TO Common Curriculum session with city speakers for this year, but it was great to be part of this new program that we look to continue moving forward. Finally, thank you to the city for its work in facilitating the class by providing senior staff and policy experts in specific areas of City Hall's work, and to all the partners who have made this possible. This really has been an insightful class that has taught us many tangible ways we can get involved within the City of Toronto and all the great work that is being done. Next week's class will be with your home institution. Each university and college is managing the class in a way appropriate to their setting. So for us students, please pay careful attention to your course outline for how your instructor will be managing the class. As well, instructions to students about rejoining their class after the session should be given to you from your professor or online learning platform, so please look out for that. As well, please join us next week on November 23rd and 24th for the Civic Lab TO Academic Summit. This is another great way to learn more about the city and its growth. Updates are available at civiclabto.ca. Registration is free. And with all that being said, this brings us to the very end of today's session and our final City Hall meeting. This is a bittersweet moment, but I hope we as students can take the things we have learned and implement them into our lives. May we be the change we wish to see. Thank you again, everyone. Stay safe and wishing you all the best of luck in your future endeavors.